Welcome to the Automotive Diagnostic Podcast. We're going to explore ways to sharpen our diagnostic skills, find learning resources, and hear from experts in the automotive field. Hey, what's going on, automotive world? Welcome to another episode of the Automotive Diagnostic Podcast. My name is Sean Tipping, and I will be your host for today's episode. Joining me on the show this week is Keith Perkins and PJ Walter. They've both been on the show before. They are joining me because we had a listener request via the Facebook group. So I appreciate that. And if you're looking for specific content in the show, this is the way to do it. Let me know what you're interested in hearing about or who you're interested in hearing from. But the request for this episode was the ADAS, specifically the new L4 ASE ADAS test that is recently came out. And so we're going to get you some information about this test, what it's all about, what you need to do to study, how it was constructed. And Keith and PJ are going to join me for this. Keith had a hand in creating the test, which he'll tell you all about in the episode. And PJ just took the test recently, so he'll offer some information there too. So if you're considering taking this ASE test or any other one, this is a great episode for information on the ASE tests. And with that out of the way, let's jump in.
Sorry, I had to get it out real quick.
You could say that if you want. It's no big deal. Just market explicit content.
It probably made it in it, actually.
Yeah, I don't know if it starts after the countdown or before. Well, good evening, boys. How are we doing?
Great.
I'm doing good.
Awesome. Thanks for joining me this evening. I appreciate it. We had somebody post on the Facebook group a request for some information on the new ADAS ASE L4 test, and we've got Keith Perkins, who helped create the test, and we got PJ, who recently took the test. So I think no better two people to put some information out there and help some guys get ready for it. So what was your thoughts on the test, PJ, after you took it?
I think so. It's been a while. I before we logged on, I was looking at when I took L1 and L3, and it's been 4 years ago for both of them now. Maybe 3 years ago for the hybrid for L3, and 4 years ago for L1. Mm-hmm. So it's hard for me to compare the composite books back then. Like, I don't really remember them as much. But I was telling Keith, it is hands down a very well-written composite book. I don't want to say it's better than L1 or L3, but this composite book is extremely well-written. I know Keith and Mike Reynolds, right? You guys both teamed up on these. I don't know who else was involved.
Yeah, so from the group of people we know, it'd be myself, Mike Reynolds, David Friend, and then Scott Brown was sprinkled in there along with like Ryan Koyman, and I think that's the major names of, I feel bad now because I feel like I'm going to forget somebody, but that's like the major names of people we would see in events and stuff that we run into. That's who you guys know. Then a lot of OEs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the composite book is really, really well written. It's almost you can use this to help you learn about these calibrations if you really wanted to.
Yeah.
So this is
originally. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. This is just like the composite vehicle. This is I don't know, I'll put it with quotations, made up vehicle that's presented to you with specific components or systems or.
Correct. And wiring diagrams and description of operation of components and systems, target system placement design. All necessary needed information for a knowledgeable candidate in advanced driver assistance systems to pass the test. Because about 50% of the test is going to be And I'm not giving anything away that's secret. This is stuff you can find in the test preparation information. And throughout this thing, I'll give you guys some info on like how ASE writes tests to give you a better understanding of how much work goes into it. But I think you're going to find that about 50% of tests you take is going to be based upon the composite vehicle, and then 50% will be based upon generic information, which is the hardest content to write to, because you cannot write a question that could be wrong for any vehicle. So if it's biased towards one manufacturer, if it's not true for another, it cannot be written. It must be correct across the board, every make manufacturer. So it's really difficult to write to.
So it's easier to write questions if you have a composite vehicle to work with.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
The questions were really well written. I didn't think there were any questions that were tricky. There was one electrical question that I did think was a little bit tricky. Something that would be pretty easy in the real world, but the way the question was worded, I can see a lot of people getting it wrong. I don't know what all I'm allowed to say and what I'm not. But
I mean, you're a test taker, so you could say as much as you want. And I've been given instruction on what I can talk about and not, so it's cool.
Yeah, so there was one question in particular that stuck with me. It was about a communication fault with a brake control module. And answer A is a blown fuse, which you would instantly think, like, that's going to be your fault. Read all of the answers. That's what I'll say. Without giving the answer away, read all of the answers. Because if you really look at where that fuse goes to, it doesn't really go to which thing it does. I don't want to give away the answer, but that was the only real like tricky question, I guess you would say. The rest of them are pretty well written. If I were to give some tips, it would probably be make sure you know how to convert millimeters to centimeters to meters. I had a bunch of those questions. Make sure you understand communication faults, especially on master-slave systems. Had a couple of those questions.
Were they named master-slave, or were they primary, secondary?
I think they're named primary, secondary, but I'm a Toyota guy, remember? It's master-slave for me.
That was a struggle, because I kept saying master-slave, and they're like, no, we can't use that anymore. Like, oh, okay.
My strategy for answering ASE questions has always been I go through all of the potential answers, and even if I see like maybe A is my answer and I'm like, yeah, I know that's right, I still go through the other three and make sure that they're wrong. Like, and I've always felt on the actual tests, maybe not so much the test, study guides, yeah, those can be questionable, but on the actual tests, they've done a really good job of only making one answer the right one, as long as you're up on the subject content. And so I'll just go through all three of them, and yeah, all those are wrong. This is definitely my answer.
So Keith, have you been through L4? I know you wrote it. Did you take it yet?
I have not taken it yet. No, we actually got a date planned for the whole shop to go take it. So we were trying to schedule that, but it looks like my local Prometric doesn't have enough spaces for us all to take it at the same time. So my guys, when they do ASEs, we pay for the test, pass or fail, and then they're clocked in. It's during work hours. So we tell them, you're clocked in, go take the test.
A little funny story. So there was only one Prometric in all of Pittsburgh since I've become a tech in 2005, right? So I've been going to the same test center since 2005. Now, where I work is on one side of Pittsburgh. And you probably don't know much about Pittsburgh, but getting through Pittsburgh, you have to go through a 2-lane tunnel that is a nightmare. So going from work to this test center, it's pretty time consuming. The problem is what I didn't know is that they added a second test center. And I went to the wrong one. So then I had to drive all the way back to the other side of Pittsburgh. I was a half hour late. That was fun. It was fun. They were yelling at me for being late. I apologize many times. But so, Keith, when you go and take this test, it's set up differently than at least L1 and L3 was. So when I took L1 and L3, I got a paper composite handbook. Now it's all on the computer, and
Correct.
as you're reading the test, it will give you a link. And it's
Correct.
nice because the composite vehicle pops up, and then you can hit Control F to search the document. I think there might be a search bar, but I'm just in the habit of hitting Control F for everything. But then you can search the document, you can find everything quickly. So that's nice too, but not just that. When we were just talking about how we talk about this is obviously not the answer, they now have a way to cross out the things that you're 100% sure are not right, which is nice.
It's a visual work. So they're trying to improve the test taking experience a lot, because a lot of people use the excuse, well, I'm not a good test taker. And that may be true. There are definitely people that are good test takers that could take advantage of a poorly written question. So let me go on my quick ASE spiel about some information that everyone should know that will help both in taking any ASE test going forward, or for those that aren't familiar with it. So when these tests are written, they acquire individuals from the industry that are quote unquote subject matter experts, voted by their peers, and just kind of I won't say buddy system, but we all know a lot of people, and we recommend people based on their skill set, right? So I've done quite a few of these subject matter expert groups now, and here's how the flow of test making works. And this isn't any secret. I've been told I'm allowed to talk about this part of it. We get together and we design a task list, and that's in that. When you go to the ASE's website and you look up the booklet on that test series, right? And the beginning of that test series gives you some test questions that they put in there, 3 or 4 of them, on how to take the test, and then some information about it. And at the beginning, the information, there's a task list, and it says a technician must know how to, and then task A1 on engine building would be how to measure a cylinder bore and appropriately check in multiple locations, blah, blah, blah. So, and a technician should know how to, and all these different things. Every question we write must be associated with a task on the task list, and they're supposed to be pretty even. We may need more questions for X task or Y task, right? So every time we write a question, it's written to one of those tasks. So the first thing is how do I know what to study? Well, the task list is the big important part. That's written out one of the very first things. Then the next thing that happens is you write a question, or sometimes you have a thought process, and this is kind of self-guided. Some people write more questions than others. Some people tear apart questions better than others. When we get into these groups, sometimes you'll get an individual that only wrote 3 or 4 questions, but they helped determine all the other questions were good verbally, right? Then other individuals can pump questions out. They'll pump out 50, 60 questions during themselves during one of these workshops. So you'll write a question, and then you write the answer, and then you add 3 distractors that a less than knowledgeable candidate may take as the correct answer. Never is it intended that any of those answers are actually possible. According to it's not like this one's more right or this one's less right. They're written to where this is an incorrect question. This is an incorrect answer. This is an incorrect answer. This is incorrect, and this one's correct. And there's a lot of information that goes into that. There's when we write answers, if all of them start with A, then in the answer starts with a different letter than the letter A, right? It starts with something like 2 different or whatever you want to say. That's a 3-in-1, and the answer can't be a 3-in-1. So a good test taker may recognize that the answer is longer than the other 3 distractors, or vice versa. There's all this stuff that goes into rules in writing these questions. So it's really difficult to write them out. And then what happens is after everyone spends this time writing these questions, we pull them all together, and then we put it up on the screen, or we all look at it, and then we try to destroy the question. What's the answer? Could any of the other ones be the answer? And remember, you're in a group of subject matter experts, OE manufacturer, engineers, instructional designers for training departments, from the aftermarket, and a ton of OE stuff, right? So, for instance, I wrote a question one time on the A1 test that was there was coolant found in the combustion chamber. Which of these could be the cause? And one of the distractors that I put was an exhaust valve guide seal, right? That's an obvious wrong answer, correct? Everyone agree? Obvious wrong answer? So. That is not a wrong answer. If you work on industrial GM heavy duty engines, they have wet exhaust valves. There's a coolant passage over the exhaust valve guide seal. I did not know that, but somebody there did. So, so to us, that would be an obvious question, right? But then if you're an engine builder that's worked on some industrial GM engines, and you're sitting there taking the test, you're going, that's wrong, right? There's this could be an answer and this could be an answer, because the answer was like head gasket or something, something obvious, but within the A1 world of engine mechanical would make sense. So those are why these workshops exist, because you can write a question that you will swear and you can ask 100 people but you get 15, 20 experts in a room, and there's somebody that knows something you don't know. That's the structure of how the questions are written. And then my other quick tip for anyone taking a test is technician A and B. We do our best not to write those at all because they are mentally difficult. But if you break it down as this is 2 true or false questions, these technicians have never talked to each other. They've never met. They're not in the same building. It's just a true or false question for A or a true or false question for B. That is kind of how you break down that question a little easier. So I give that ASE spiel anytime anyone asks me about it. But that whole thing, hopefully that will be usable for someone in the future and looking at that. And everything comes down to is this a good question? Then we get done writing all these questions and it goes to someone who has to rewrite them. They must be at an 8th grade reading level, because across the country, that's really the only thing that's standardized is up to like 8th grade reading. And then, so it's difficult. And then things get moved around. So sometimes the test gets broken by an editor. Although it's tried to stay true to its actual original form, certain verbiage isn't used, right? Like I'm in Oklahoma, we use tappet cover still a lot. I have people all the time, it's a tappet cover gasket. I'm like, it's a valve cover gasket, but sure, whatever. Or a head cover gasket. That's used a lot in terminology depending upon the manufacturer you work on. So
sure,
lots and lots of stuff like that gets broken down. So
it's quite the effort that goes into making any of these tests. But I got to imagine a brand new one that you didn't have anything to work with. That's got to be a ton of work.
Yeah, you can download the vehicle composite, the composite vehicle booklet on the ASE website. That thing at one point in time was almost 100 pages, and it just got to become an animal, and we had to wrangle it back. So it could have been so much larger, but the amount of money it costs to make a test that big and have someone sit there, like your cost of taking that test would be expensive just because of how much money it costs to have Prometric host that and have a technician sit there for 3.5 hours.
Right.
Yeah, I think you guys got it down to about 50 pages.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah.
What I'll do actually is there's the ASE study guide or introduction to the test, and then also the composite vehicle. And I can actually put links to those in the show notes for this episode for anybody listening that wants to check them out. I briefly scanned through them before we launch this. I haven't studied, or I'll probably try to take this test eventually, but figured I'd hear about it first, because
for a candidate that's knowledgeable, you will get a very high passing score.
Yeah. So you were talking about some people are just better at taking tests. I've always felt like I'm a good test taker. If I have a base level knowledge of a subject, I feel like I can pass a multiple choice test. And example of that, I'm not trying to brag or anything. I'm just my experience with ASE tests. I took the L3 test in 2014, kind of like you did with this one, PJ, where it was introductory, right? It's the first time they're doing it. We're trying to get people in to come do this test. It was longer than the normal one. And I didn't have a lot of experience with hybrids or electric. Well, it was just the hybrid test at that point. It wasn't an electric vehicle, but I didn't personally, I had pulled some safety disconnects, but that was it. But I studied up on what I could. And with base level understanding of mechanics and then electrical, I was able to pass the test. That's what got me through that test, honestly, was understanding electrical, got me the passing grade on that. And then I got it. I'm like, oh boy, I have this certification. Now I feel like I actually need to go, really work on these things and get better at this. But,
well, that's the nice thing that I like about ASEs, especially when I originally took L1, was it wasn't just good enough to pass, right? It like, how do I want to say this? It like humbled me. Like I pay attention to the questions that I do not know. And it's like, I need to work on this. Like I'm humble enough put my ego aside. Even though I passed, I know if I get 5 or 6, however many wrong, I know that I need to study on those things. That's what's nice about ASE. Even if you do pass the test, there's always more to learn.
Must go buy 5-gas analyzer.
Yeah. So I mentioned these tests are longer, and I think one of you said that was the case with this one, where it's almost double the questions as what the final will be.
This one was 80 questions, and I had 3 hours to do it.
Okay.
I think the final test will be 40 questions in 2 hours to complete it.
Correct. Yeah. So the way it's setting right now, everyone that's taking the test, come August 23rd, I'll be in Leesburg, Virginia, looking over what is a passing score for this test. Liz and I, actually, Liz is going as well to work on this. What is a passing test and some other metrics in it, and then kind of maybe some preliminary. I'm not sure. I haven't ever done a new L series test overlook after the test run of the test. So this is the first for me too, but I don't know what else we're looking at. But typically, so everyone's taking an ASE test and they've got that little note at the beginning that says there's 10 questions that aren't graded against you, right? But you don't know what they are. Mm-hmm. So every one of these workshops we update all the time. So if you've ever gone and taken the A1 test 10 years ago, it was a really old test series. It hadn't been in 2015 when we redid the A1 test. It had not been done in over 8 years, redone or updated. So there was still like a ton of vacuum regulated fuel pressure regulator questions. There was nothing about multiple displacement, variable valve lift, variable valve timing. So all of those things got added in there, right? So if you go take the A1 test now, you're going to get asked about displacement on demand, variable compression ratio, variable valve lift, variable valve timing, gasoline direct injection. You're going to be asked about those, right? And that's part of what happens during these workshops, is updating them as well. Well, this is kind of a whole new thing, right? Well, that's what those test questions are. Every time we have a workshop, we make these new pool of questions, we add them in, and then we look and go, okay, out of X amount of people that passed this with a very high score, a lot of those people missed this question. So what is wrong with this question? And then it gets brought in during a workshop. So when it becomes a statistical anomaly, it gets set aside and it's like, hey, hold up, don't grade this against people, because people that are passing this at a high level are missing this question. This may be a poorly written question, a broken question, a whatever, right? It might actually have 2 right answers because it falls through the cracks, right? So that's what those are. And this first, months of this all the way up until September of this year, no one will get their grade for that, and it will be the 80 question version. Just as soon as the August setup is done and we go into the fall actual session for ASE, it'll go to the normal test and you'll be getting your results immediately, right? And that's all written in an email that was put out by ASE. But it'll be nice to see that, and I'm going to try to take it before because I want to see the 80 question version for sure and kind of see. It's kind of fun to sit there in an ASE and be like, oh, I wrote this question. I know the answer to this one. Feels kind of like cheating.
Well, yeah, you better get that question right.
Yeah.
That's what Mike Reynolds said on Facebook. He was like, watch you get a better score than I do. I'm like, if I get a better score than you do, something's wrong. You probably wrote, at least a quarter of the questions.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of feedback about this test so far, and I'm fairly positive this is probably one of the easiest advanced level tests, simply because there are so many hard physics inputs into ADAS, right? Like a radar works this way and a camera works this way, right? So there are a lot of questions, because when it came to writing non-vehicle specific questions, it was like, a radar calibration has failed. Which of these could be the cause? And you're like, the room's too dark, the room's too light, there's a 5G tower next to you, and it's like, oh, the target's in the wrong location. Well, I know how this works. So a knowledgeable candidate who understands ADAS would totally understand this test really well. Do you agree or disagree, PJ, taking it?
I do agree, but I do think you do need to be somewhat knowledgeable, right? So there were some questions about dynamic calibrations. and what road conditions are most conducive for a camera calibration compared to a radar calibration. So if it's not something you've done before and you're just going in there, just taking it. Heck, if I'm going to be honest with you, if you're a Toyota dealership tech and you don't do dynamic calibrations, 2022 models are dynamic now, but still, you need to understand what road conditions are best for dynamic calibrations, especially the difference between radars and front cameras, how weather affects different sensors, right? And you need to know what these different sensors are. Like LiDAR is light waves, and blind spot monitors, electromagnetic waves, and ultrasonic is sound waves, and how weather affects these things. So I had a couple questions about how weather affects each radar system differently.
Yeah.
So even though it's easy for someone like Keith Perkins, who does this stuff all the time,
but it'd be advantageous to actually have done some of these yourself before you jump into the test.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes.
I can see that. But the overarching thing is if you understand how each system operates, you'll have a very good basis of where to start on this. You've got to kind of think outside the box. One thing I noticed we didn't write a bunch to was suspension issues. So in later iterations of that, I have lots of test questions that I'm going to get in the pool that, because I've been seeing a lot more lately. As we get more aged vehicles in our bays, I'm finding more like worn front strut springs are causing issues like, this vehicle's ride height is too far out from factory to pass correctly.
I did have a question about broken rear springs causing unintended activation of the system. I do remember a question like that.
Yeah, we've got some about rear height causing issues with like front pitch on camera-based systems, and then ultrasonic. Matter of fact, on all of the systems, we tried to take, like, when we found a good question, like with a good answer key, we were like, how can we take this question into each category, right? How can a broken spring as the answer, because it adjusts pitch of the vehicle and then also thrust angle, right? Depending upon the suspension type. So, like, how can we take that answer and push it into an ultrasonic question, a radar-based question, a camera-based question, so on and so forth, right? So you may find very similar questions with that. And it's to determine the understanding of that. So, yeah, so having rear springs, I think it was a Subaru guy that come up with some of those questions. And they were really, there's some questions about even like heads-up display type that can become difficult. There's a few, like, not gonna lie, during the workshop, they put some questions up there and I totally bombed them because I was like, I don't understand what I'm missing here. That none of it made sense to me. And there's just portions of that were completely dumbfounded me. I just didn't like I said, the heads-up display thing. I was unaware that polarized lenses can affect heads-up display. Depending upon
like
the type of
sunglasses you're talking about?
Yes, polarized sunglasses.
I got that one wrong.
Mess up with your view of. Yeah, I did too. Just so we're clear, I did too. Like the first time I saw it, I was like, "What?" And there's some documentation from like BMW and Porsche about their brand of sunglasses they sell for driving their cars doesn't affect the heads-up display. And I'm like, of course they do. Of course. It's all about the money.
Yeah. Oh, sir, you can't wear those sunglasses in the BMW.
Yeah, sorry, your Oakleys aren't going to work in your BMW.
Oh, man. So what do you guys think, as you were mentioning, as these vehicles age, right, and more ADAS features on vehicles, we're moving, I don't know how many years down the road to autonomous vehicles, and this stuff's going to be more and more commonplace and critical to vehicle operation. Do you see like maybe not ASE, but like this becoming required if you want to work on these systems eventually? Or what's nobody knows what's going to happen, but what's your prediction for the future with these systems?
Go for it, PJ.
I have no real prediction. I can't. I have no real prediction, but I did hear through the grapevine that insurance companies were debating on requiring L4
Mm.
to pay for these calibrations. Have you heard anything like that?
No, but I'm positive they won't specify only ASE because iCar already has a few programs in place as well.
So they
we're
may
working
just
on
say
that
you
as
need some type of certification.
some type of. They'll probably use the same verbiage they use for a lot of things that they will only pay out for someone with a nationally recognized certification, which for ADAS will probably be something like ASE or iCar. It'll probably be the only two options out there. Just kind of depends. There's some friends of ours that are working on like certification type processes that are separate from the rest of the industry, something new. So I don't know how much that I'm allowed to talk about at all. So we'll leave it at that. There may be some other cool certification processes coming out to enhance those that are already out there.
Gotcha.
But I could see that. So my thought for the future is I'm more doom and gloom, fire and brimstone. I suspect that we will have more and more uncalibrated vehicles to the point where we will have a John Eagle collision type case for ADAS calibrations. So what I have been told, again, I actually haven't had the time to research this and prove it or disprove it. So I will leave it that this is through the grapevine and of no actual truth yet. But there have been 3 cases that involved ADAS and the possibility of litigation because one wasn't calibrated correctly. All 3 of them were based on it wasn't calibrated with an OEE system. And so far that I'd heard is those 3 cases all ended in success with using an aftermarket system was perfectly fine, at least by the court system so far. Because I guess they have to prove that using a non-OE system would be an issue. And so that's I see that being more of the fight that everyone's got into for a while. And then there'll be a lot of these cars that have oddball systems like some of the early Infinity LiDAR and some of the early camera-based Hyundai Kia systems like 08, 09 cars had lane departure warning on some Hyundais.
Yeah.
So those that have
Sienna.
Yeah. So some of those that have weird targets and stuff, I think those cars will set around being uncalibrated, or in a lot of those cars, to get them calibrated correctly, the cost will far outweigh the value of the vehicle. So we'll have a lot of e-waste in cars that are of low quality in the used market because of it. That's what I suspect will happen kind of overall. And it'll get to the point where I would really hope to see at some point a standard camera target, a standard radar target and procedure, both static and dynamic as an option, as an either or, because so many cars are unfixable because no one's willing to spend money on the
like a OBD2 of ADAS.
Yeah.
Okay.
Shops just aren't big enough to do static calibrations. At least where I'm from, everything is an old 2-bay, old gas station.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. I heard that thing about land they're not going to make anymore. And so it's difficult to acquire.
Well, that was actually going to be another question that I had was, do you foresee this for maybe somebody who's young, a technician that's in tech school, maybe you just hate where you're at or what you're doing? Could you make a career just out of this in the future? Maybe not today, but maybe today. I don't know. You guys can tell me, but 10 years down the road, could you just be an ADAS tech and be successful in it? You think it's going to be that, or is most of the stuff going to be dynamic and then it's not as big of a deal as we're making it out to be?
I expect most manufacturers to do both static and dynamic. Doing dynamic calibrations up north above, up here in Pittsburgh during the winter time, it's really hard. The roads are nothing but white from salt.
Yeah, there's no lines.
Yeah, exactly. There's no lines on the ground from December to February. So doing a dynamic calibration then, it's almost impossible. So static is going to come in handy in those situations, but I think technology will advance enough where they'll be able to do both static and dynamic.
Yeah, we will see a heavy push from manufacturers to give the either or. There's a static or dynamic option just because of that. There are so many vehicles. Like, could you imagine trying to do a dynamic calibration on like a Ford truck in Staten Island? Like you got to drive over 55 miles per hour, not making abrupt left or right turns or acceleration, deceleration. Like you got to drive out to LaGuardia to try that. That's just not going to happen, right? So most manufacturers have pushed towards also a static option. But then back to the original question: could a young tech, come out and do just this? I think the glass industry is running into this now. They thought, I could buy this XYZ aftermarket calibration system, and I also install glass, so it's perfect. And then they get in there, and if you're in these ADAS groups of these guys, and I hate to be demeaning towards the group of glass individuals, but the heavy 99% of them that are doing this have little to no understanding of what's really happening. So there's every single day I'm in these groups, I'm reading someone, I'm trying to do this calibration, it's failing, what should I do? And I'm like, well, it all goes back to exactly the same thing, which is reading service info and understanding the system. And then the answer becomes pretty prevalent to the point where I'm the bad guy because I'm like, look, man, just double check your suspension heights. We got to check. And they go, I'm just a glass guy. I'm not doing an alignment. I'm like, well, in order for this to be successful, the alignment has to be correct. Thrust angle is important. Steering angle is important. A vehicle with a skewed steering angle sensor will fail a calibration forever. You're not going to move the target around to fix that. And you should never move the target around from the factory position anyways. But this is a daily, like dozens of times a day per group that's asked. And I think the glass industry is finding out that you can't just do ADAS without understanding the rest of the vehicle. Vehicles are too intertwined system to system to do anything successfully with a good success rate, a high success rate, without understanding all of the systems in the vehicle. It's just, I just don't see it being that way. So it's going to be a high level, although this is a remedial task type thing where you're dropping plumb bobs and pulling strings and measuring with a laser over and over and over again. It's kind of like programming. It's really easy until it's not. And as soon as there's a problem, that's when it separates, the men from the women, right? Where we have no idea what we're doing, and Liz steps in and figures it out. That's
Keith, have you had a blind spot fail because of a Kappa sticker yet?
Yeah.
Those metallic
stupid
Kappa
foil
stickers?
Kappa sticker. Yeah.
I've had it twice. I just got hit with it today again.
I don't even know what's
you almost
a
check
Kappa
for
sticker.
it now.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a part number sticker on the inside of back bumpers, rear bumpers, that are right in the blind spot area. Kind of like the stickers on tires, how it's like a metallic sticker.
Sure.
It's the same thing. But they put
Kappa
it on
is
the
Certified
inside of bumpers.
Automotive Parts Association is Kappa. Certified Automotive Parts Association. That's correct. Yeah. Had to pull the Rolodex up. So they certify things as being quality aftermarket parts, and then they smack their sticker on it, and they put that foil sticker right where the blind spot monitor tries to see through. And that doesn't work well. Not at all.
Dang.
Also,
that's a handy tip there.
Yeah. I work on a lot of Chryslers that have oddball blind spot monitoring after they're installed. Like the blind spot indicator comes on for no reason, goes off for no reason, doesn't see cars, turns on when there's no cars, and 99% of the time, the blind spot monitors are flipped inside out and they're facing towards the car instead of facing outward. Super common. Like dozens of times that has happened.
That's why I had that question so many times on L4. I
So
had
that was
multiple
another
questions about the sensor being on backwards.
So that's another thing that was a first for ASE. Typically, we're not allowed to write questions that the answer is another technician screwed up. Like that's kind of a no-no in the test writing thing for ASE. But in this test, all of us that work in the field pushed really hard. We're like, look, this is a real problem. Reassembly being incorrect is a real issue. So that did get to show up a lot because we find that a vast majority of the issues, 99% of the issues of a calibration failing after a collision repair are due to an improper collision repair or an incomplete collision repair. Maybe an alignment's not done. Maybe the steering angle didn't get reset after the alignment. Maybe the suspension ride height's wrong. Maybe a bent suspension component, improper thrust angle, improper assembly, wiring damage, you name it. That's typically the problem.
So yeah, and it sounds like visual inspection after repair, and you got issues like that. It's going to be really important too to just get your eyes on some of these components and make sure that the bracket's not bent. I've seen, people post case studies about that. Seems to be a common issue. Or I haven't heard of it flipped around upside down or backwards, but that could totally happen.
Radars flopping around.
Yeah, just plugged in and hanging. That happens a lot. We didn't unplug it, so it doesn't need calibrated. I'm like, it's pointing at the floor. It's not how that works. I get guys at body shops all day that tell me that's not how that works. I'm like, that is exactly how that works. I'm like, if you touched it, we must calibrate it. No. Yes. Well, my windshield guy said that he doesn't want to unplug it, so you don't have to calibrate it. Oh. I dream of the day where ADAS calibration sensors have like a void sticker on them, and if it gets touched, it has to be calibrated. And then those of us are like smog, like only those of us that are certified get to put a new void sticker on it.
They just send Keith a roll, and he can put the.
So, what are some other takeaways, PJ? From now I'm questioning. I'm taking the lead there. Anything else you noticed from the test that was different? Is what I kind of wanted to know.
As far as different, not really. Good. It was, like I said, it was a well-written test. I liked how it was written. I like the new system that they're using as far as crossing out answers and highlighting answers like probable answers. You had the ability to highlight them as well. But I like the test. I like the test. I think you guys did a heck of a job, mixing different manufacturers, right? Because we'll say it's a very similar front camera calibration to a Honda,
Yeah.
And I think some of the surround calibrations might have been like a BMW or European calibration of,
Yeah, trying to use a matte style.
Yeah, so just about all the manufacturers got a little bit in there. But yeah, it was just well written. It was hard enough where somebody who does not know these systems probably isn't going to pass it.
Right. That's the point of every test, right? To separate the knowledgeable from less than knowledgeable.
But if you know these systems and if you know how these systems operate, now keep in mind I'm currently building an ADAS class myself, so I'm kind of cheating as well.
Hey, me too.
Going in deep dives into LiDAR and how cameras can do road sign, what do they call it?
Recognition.
Yeah, road sign recognition and all that stuff. So yeah, I kind of got a little bit of a head start myself just by building a class, because anybody who's built a class knows that you learn far more building a class than you ever will working on cars.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's insane. Like reading SAE documents and...
Well, all of us teach and write content in some capacity, all three of us. So we can all agree that you never learn more than when you're trying to study to teach it to somebody.
Yep.
Yeah, it's insane. Building a class is probably one of the hardest things I've ever done, only because it never feels like there's an end.
Right.
Right? Do you feel that way, Keith? Like as I'm building a class, it's like, no, I need to know more about this. And then as you learn more, then you realize that there's a lot that you don't know. So then you have to learn more. And it's just this vicious cycle that never ends.
Yeah. Once you actually teach the class, then you're like, and you put in all that work, you're like, okay, well, it could be that much better, or I can get to the point better here. I do this differently. And so even if you do a really good job getting the information together, then you want to revamp the way it's presented or how it interacts with the students or whatever. And it's never a finished product. There's always something more that you want to tweak or do better, find out more about.
Yeah. I've been teaching the same drivability class for 2 years now, and I still add and take stuff away.
I have a programming
I don't
class.
how this went. What's up?
I have a programming class. You want to talk about consistently adding and taking away things?
But that's not at your choice.
No,
that's because you don't have a choice.
But still,
and
like,
look, just Y-Tech just got changed today.
So, funny story. I'm teaching domestic CTI programming tomorrow evening and Thursday, because I teach every Tuesday and Thursday for CTI in the evening. And I'm like rushing to get this class changed for tomorrow so it's up to date. Because I wrote that class for CTI, and I'm constantly like, literally 2 days ago, I wrote an email to him saying, hey, I just updated the GM pictures on this, because the TechLine Connect changed a little bit. They put all the stuff on the left-hand side.
Yeah.
It was like a couple weeks ago they did that, and I just haven't got around to changing it because it wasn't that big of a change, right? It doesn't change your ability to do it by that class being out of date by 3 weeks. But I just changed all that stuff and sent an email 2 days ago to CTI. I was like, hey, here's some changes for the domestic class. And then I sent an email this morning. It was like, stop, wait, there's more. Just give me a few days. So I'm like, oh, this happens every time. Like and what sucks about it for me, like when I write one of those classes or when I teach a programming class, I'll get the books printed, and then typically by the time the books are printed to when it's time to teach class, there's already a revision. So I'm like, all right, guys, first day of class, first 20 minutes, real quick. Everyone turn to page 67 in the book real quick. Mark this out, or I printed a revision. Staple this in your book. This is so, and I always order extra books. So everyone's always asking me about my book, and I'm like, it's not really good without class. So now I have 4 versions of the book laying around in the shop. So we're going to put them up on the website pretty soon and just be like, these are all wrong. I'll sell them to you cheap.
Yeah, if you want the 2018 version, you're not going to be able to do a whole lot with it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like they're useless. That's why I feel every time I write a class, I'm like, it's just useless later.
Yeah. What else do you guys got going on? I mean, Keith, I know you're super busy. We're all super busy.
Yeah.
This industry, but what's new with both of you guys?
I'm just doing the World Pack thing after work, still working in the dealership. Not sure if I'm allowed to say that, but I no longer care if I'm allowed to say that.
We're going to have to name it something. The Waltering.
Yeah, Toyota doesn't like me being everywhere, so too bad. But yeah, I'm still working for the dealership for now. Doing the World Pack thing at night. I moderate classes quite a bit. Trying to build some classes up. I have 2 finished. I have a basic electrical and intro to scope class. I have the Toyota drivability class, and trying to build an ADAS class currently.
And you're going to be teaching Super Saturday. Am I allowed to say that?
Yeah, I'll be teaching at Super Saturday. I don't
That's
know if
posted
anyone's going
in
to be in
public already.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody's going to be in my class with the big guns I'm going against, like John Thornton. Like, who's going to take my class with John Thornton there? I don't even want to take my class. Like, I want to send in John Thornton's class.
Go send his class. Like, here's a recording of my class.
But yeah, I'm teaching it Super Saturday. I believe it's the evening class. I believe it's one of the evening classes. So
awesome. I'm planning on going to this. I've never been, and I've tried twice, and it's been canceled or shut down for COVID, and so I'm excited to actually go.
Yeah. Now you were at ASTE last year.
Mm-hmm.
Keith, are you teaching at ASTE?
Yes.
Which class are you teaching down there?
So I'm going to do a destination class at the Research and Development Center for CTI. So we're probably going to have a couple Asian cars up there and just do a bunch of programming hands-on. Going to bring a bunch of Isaac's laptops and interfaces and stuff and get some people programming some stuff, I think.
Yeah, I'm helping Isaac with his hybrid class on there. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that either, but Isaac and I were going to be doing a 8-hour hybrid class in the CTI Center as well.
Yep.
Some hands-on hybrid testing.
Doing it Thursday or Friday, right? One of those days.
I don't know.
So there is going to be classes from ASTE at the Research and Development Center Thursday, Friday, and Saturday.
Nice. Well, I guess I got to go to both of those now.
Yeah, the RDC is really cool. It's a full functioning shop and research center and video studio, so it's pretty cool.
I just know I need to leave my hotel at 3 a.m. that Sunday to fly into Florida, because after Keith, when we were at STX, we went to Universal, right?
Right.
Were you at Universal also?
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you
I
go?
went there.
All right, so we were at Universal, and I was telling my wife about it, so she decided to schedule a trip to Universal to surprise my daughter who loves Harry Potter. She scheduled it the day after ASTE. But she wants to surprise my daughter, and they are getting to Florida at 10 in the morning. And the only flight option I have to be there to see the surprise is me leaving at 3 in the morning.
Oh, goodness.
That should be fun, though.
Yeah, it will be fun.
Well, then I will say that I have a lot more going on than you do, PJ. I miss the days where I didn't have that much going on. Let's see. We're still teaching, we're doing classes at the L1 training facility in Tulsa, like every month or two. We got one coming up in August, another programming class in August. Trying to get with Christofferson. He keeps hitting me up to do EPROM dates at the shop again, but I'm just trying to find dates to plug in and say yes to him to do another EPROM event there. I think I got another hands-on. I have a funny name for the class just so it will attract the people that need to take it anyways. It's called Advanced Application of Fundamental Electrical Theory. So it's basic electrical plus what can you do with your scope that's cool. That class I teach a couple times a year too at the shop. And then of course for those that don't know, I have a brick and mortar shop that services customers. Then we also have a mobile company with 3 vans. So I currently have 3 guys right now. I got a Laramie and 2 Zacks that are running around in vans in Tulsa, Oklahoma, going to other shops, doing all that stuff. I'm still writing WorldPack and CTI classes. I'm still writing classes for myself, still running the stuff on the website, but I'm also teaching every Tuesday and Thursday night for CTI.
Dang.
Virtual, yeah. And then also I do strategic accounts for CTI and WorldPack. So every month or two I'm doing like Firestone, Bridgestone, CarMax stuff all across the country. So
And an ASE content expert. I don't know if you just threw that in there, but
yeah, that too. I'm slowly pushing Liz into that. She's going to be going with me in August for the ASE thing because she's done hundreds of ADAS calibrations, just hundreds. Every one of them that comes to the shop, which is all throughout the day, Monday through Friday, she's doing them. So
nice.
It's a daunting task.
You mentioned that if you see a lot of people get a question wrong, you're going to throw it out. What about the other end? What if you see 100% of the people get a question right? Do you think that's too easy of a question?
I don't know, actually. That's a great question. I'm going to have to ask someone and then ask if it's okay for me to share the answer. I do know that it's open knowledge. Those first questions are test questions, and that I have been instructed that it's okay to talk about how they get tested and then reevaluated. And we know for sure when I get told for sure that when questions are missed too often by people who otherwise score highly, that question gets reevaluated by the group. And then like every time I go in for a workshop, that's what we start with. Like, hey, here's all the questions that went through the last test series that are of question now. And some of them are because the age group of technicians is changing and certain verbiage and system types are just no longer. And my best example is like the vacuum controlled fuel pressure regulator system. Like we basically had to remove all those questions from the A1 tests because what's the last car that has one of those? Like a Ford truck, like a 05, 06 Ford truck still uses, some of their V6s still used a vacuum regulated fuel pressure regulator. Everything else is electronic.
That's got to be the latest.
Electronic or
the
returnless or whatever.
Had it for a while.
Oh,
I bet you a 15 4Runner has it still.
What?
Yeah.
But you need to understand the 4Runner's like, if you want a solid vehicle, you got to go with the 4Runner. Still use like older technology, the best powertrain ever built. I'm trying to get on Toyota Cell's good side now.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I'll agree with that for sure. And like everyone dogs Nissans, myself and Brandon Dills for like a Nissan, but we both have similar taste. We like the rear wheel drive V8, V6, 4-wheel drive. If it's CVT, it's trash. I'm not gonna lie. It's just a piece of junk. But like Our NV 2500 vans we use for mobile, I buy the 4-liter ones, those 6 cylinders, and they all come with a 4-liter and a 5-speed. They've been using that drivetrain since like 03, 04. And you can get a 19 or 20 NV 2500, same thing. There's no direct injection. It's still got, port injection, still variable valve time, same exact engine and trans.
Yeah.
Nice.
The 5ER trans and the 4-liter, fantastic combo.
Well, sometimes something just works, right? And you wish they wouldn't get away from that, but
yeah, it happens.
So, Sean, do you do any ADAS programming?
No, we had some targets at school, and we did a little bit with that, very little. And I've done some at training events, and then I've done some dynamic stuff where you don't need targets. But one of the reasons I thought this would be interesting to talk to you guys would be like for somebody like me who is very, very inexperienced, what's even necessary for me to attempt this test. And I feel like I need to go out and do some and then do some studying on top of it.
Yeah. So to go into that, like, I don't know how much more time we got. I don't care. But to cover that kind of stuff, definitely go do some, but then you're going to have to study like, okay, first of all, what's the difference between a static and dynamic, right? And then that alone, if you're not familiar with ADAS calibrations at all, that can trip you up. Static using a target and dynamic used initializing a calibration function in a module and then driving it until that's complete. And then what does complete look like and what's important? And like, so the basics of ADAS are heavily leaned on following service info. Like vehicle setup and preparation and area setup and preparation is the make or break thing. Some cars are just highly susceptible to issues. Like the sequential, we still haven't bought the one-time recognition Toyota Target. I just haven't broke down and done it. We just still do the 3-step, right? On some of those, which is terrible because the third one or the second one gives us trouble, and we've got to go and do exactly what service info says and have somebody hold up a giant cardboard sheet behind it because it's always something in the background.
Yeah.
So that's just kind of how what it runs into is like so vehicle setup's important. Like tire pressures are actually important. Fuel level is actually important. Ride height is actually important. It really is. The vast majority of people that run into a problem have not followed that. They've kind of blasé with it. So our issue is fuel level. We do a lot of cars at collision centers and fuel levels off. And I'm like, I got to go put gas in this thing. And they're like, are you serious? I'm like, yeah, that's what it says. So my question was always like, the manufacturers say it has to be full. The car is shipped empty. What did they do to do this at the end of the line? And then some in-depth research revealed that end-of-line calibrations are nothing like aftermarket. That's a bad term. After end-of-line calibrations are totally different than the end-of-line calibration.
Gotcha.
Toyota got a picture from a Toyota manufacturing plant, and they have that big board. I'm sure PJ's seen it. It's got like all the different targets in the one spot on one board. And it's really weird because they're all over the place. And you're like, how does that work? And it's like, well, it's the end-of-line calibration. So the car is on a jig based on like the unibody and stuff. It's not the precision calculation, because that's the argument by a lot of companies. They're like, oh, well, our target's smaller, and that's fine because the end-of-line calibration is smaller. Like, you cannot replicate the end-of-line accuracy in after sales, like on a non 100% level, non-frame jigged vehicle with perfect lighting. It just can't happen. And that's the issue. So that was always really interesting to me.
Do any of the vehicles have to be loaded beyond the gas tank? And what I'm thinking of is doing alignments. I did a lot of those at Firestone, and they'd have the warning that pop up, say, hey, you're supposed to load this vehicle simulating passengers
40 pounds here, 40 pounds here, 80 pounds here. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have not done one yet that required additional loading beyond a full fuel level.
Not that I've come across either.
Most of them tell you to remove any loads from the vehicle that are not standard. Yeah, so don't remove the spare tire, but if there's a bag and if there's luggage in the back, remove it.
Gotcha.
My thing is tires. A lot of the manufacturers don't specify tread depth issues, and we run into it a lot with collision cars and stuff. It's like it's got a set of new tires on the rear, not the front, and we got to measure them. And the rear tires are a different brand than the front, and you measure the actual height. And we just had a Tiguan that came from a collision center that got a brand new left front tire, and the other 3 tires were fine, but it was set in the TPMS code and it was indirect system. And the tires both had similar tread depth, but they were different brands. And one was 1.2 centimeters taller than the other.
Yep. I've run into that, not with that specific, but it was, I think it was an ABS or wheel speed sensor issue. And the same thing, they were new tires, but one was a different brand. And we did the tape thing where you put a piece of tape and you roll it across the shop. We're like, oh yeah, this is way off on this one tire. So
yeah, we just straight up measured height and it was 1.2 centimeters different. I'm like, that is like half an inch.
Yeah.
And they were just different brands. Both of them are pretty new, had same tread depth. Luckily in Otis, in the factory tool, it even says when you select and you go through the guided functions, it says there's a new tire present. And you're like, yes. And then it gives a message that says as much as 3 millimeters or more of tread depth difference will cause this issue with a TPMS light. I'm like, 1.2 centimeters of total height is absolutely more than 3 millimeters of tread depth. So it's pretty crazy. That kind of stuff's what trips a lot of people up. So getting into ADAS is just literally being really precise with following instructions.
So, and that's, I think, an important point when you say following instructions, you're talking about right from service information as opposed to maybe the aftermarket scan tool. Have you run into issues where instructions on the tool maybe are misleading or inaccurate? I've
had them both ways. I've had them where they're... Go ahead, PJ. Sorry.
I was just going to say the instructions on the tool are going to be far different than service information, generally speaking, just because of how things get set up with their stand compared to OEM stands, at least from my experience and what I've seen. I have not used aftermarket targets myself, but I've looked through aftermarket service information, or not aftermarket service information, but aftermarket scan tool instructions. And the setup procedures usually a little bit different than service information.
Right. What I will find is that we use a lot of aftermarket targets with factory scan tools and factory service information. We do that a lot just because we bought an Autel ADAS kit early on, and then we've supplemented a lot of factory into it since then. And then tried to replicate some factory targeting systems. Well, I mean, I called PJ and was like, can you send me dimensions on this thing? And he's like, here's a picture that I found on the internet that's got all exactly the description. I'm like, oh, cool. I probably should have Googled a little harder. And so, you know, we find that same thing. The instructions that come with an aftermarket system are typically geared towards their tool. And for us, it presents a little bit of a challenge sometimes because the factory instructions may have you place the target based on the base of the target at a location, and the aftermarket scan tool with an aftermarket target may be having you place that at the same location in the world for the target distance, but the stand difference is because maybe the stand base sets at a different point or height or whatever. So for us, it's a lot of juggling. Sometimes, like, we have some aftermarket targets of some, and then we bought the OE ones just because setting up the aftermarket target was too cumbersome using factory instructions. So we're like, we just need to get the factory stand. It's the only way to get more accurate. Although the target may be exactly the same dimensions, contrast, and usually the build quality of the aftermarket is far superior to the factory target. In almost every instance, we found that the build quality of an aftermarket, whether it be Autel or Top Don or Think Car or Launch's targeting system, they're far superior in quality than the OE. So a lot of that. Yeah.
I mean, keep in mind that Mitsubishi has you taping aluminum together to build your radar cone. Toyota has you printing out the camera target and gluing it to a piece of cardboard.
Yeah. And then double side stick taping it to a stand. And Mercedes has you hang their target on their battery charging cart. And yeah. So similar to PJ, I've been writing an ADAS class for quite a while, and I've what's funny is because we do so many calibrations, I literally have 1,000 plus calibrations to look through of pictures So I set up our system to where when my guys do a calibration, they have to take a picture of the cluster, a picture of the ADAS buttons, four-corner picture, a picture of the service information, a picture of the scan tool saying success, a picture of their setup of the targets, and then anything they find, right? So typically I've got anywhere from 10 to 20 pictures per calibration over the last couple of years of doing calibrations saved up, right? And these are all in our information system as like a DVI. So I've got so many examples to use, and I have hundreds of pictures of bent brackets, incorrectly installed components, zip tied stuff, sheetrock screwed stuff, self tappers put into things. Yeah, you name it, I got pictures of it. It's awesome. And a lot of this, like beyond reading the service info, I guess the part I should have harped on more was understanding what you're doing. Right? Like, why are we placing this target in this location? It's because we have to give the camera a reference point of where 0 is. So we must be very accurate in where we place this target. And that's what a lot of the guys that are doing this, that are glass installers or someone who's just trying to do ADAS stuff, they're moving a target around, right? Like, you're moving 0 around. You can't do that. You got to get it exactly where it's supposed to be and then figure out what's wrong with the car, why it doesn't see 0.
So Sean, you've only done these in at training events. You haven't done any.
So yeah, I've done a couple in training events, taken some classes.
Have you done any hands-on though, or have you just had any?
Yeah, they were hands-on ones. It was Vision, actually a few years ago. They had a car in this big classroom, and we set up I believe it was the hotel setup and all that. We did that.
Yeah, it was the Audi and the Toyota.
Yep.
Were you there, Sean?
What's that?
I was there too.
Were you in that class too?
Like 2019?
Yep.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah,
Small
Randy Briggs was
world.
teaching it.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't know either of you two then, actually.
Yep.
So yeah, in classes like that, there was one other one where I did it, and then we had targets at the college, and the problem was getting vehicles in that even needed it, and that was our challenge because all of our school cars were too old. And we got the targets after COVID dropped, so we couldn't take anything live in besides student cars, and none of the students are driving around vehicles that need these targets or anything. So we did, I think, one, and it's been sitting ever since. But as time progresses, I'm sure I'll get into it more and do more. I haven't invested in it for my mobile business because I don't have the room in my Transit Connect. The shops I go to, like you mentioned, PJ, are not equipped to properly do them. Maybe once I get more into body shops, but yeah, I'm learning a ton from you guys right now. So this is awesome.
Now, if you, once you do a couple, you kind of understand what they want. You know, Honda and Toyota, their directions are a little bit different, but once you do a couple of them, you kind of just learn what they want. But if you just want to get started and you want to do it cheaply, I'd really start with Toyota. You can get the stands and the targets really inexpensive.
Okay.
You're talking about under $500, I'd say.
Yep.
And you can do all Toyota calibrations.
That ain't bad at all.
Yeah. You know, Honda's a little more. I think I ended up spending $2,000, $2,500 on my Honda OEM targets. The problem with OEM targets is when you get into Nissan.
You get a $5,000 radar plate,
and it's massive. Like you'd have to haul it on the roof of your Connect. Yeah. It's a massive target, and I'm sure it's heavy.
Yeah, so it's heavy.
So yeah. OEM is nice until you get to European and Nissan calibrations. Right.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, that's a kind of pick your battle sort of thing. At least for my mobile business, where it's like, is that the direction I want to go? I'm trying to and doing better with like keys and doing more and more programming and easing slightly away from diagnostics a little bit. But it's like, where do I want to put my focus? Because me personally, I can only absorb so much. So I gotta decide where to focus that energy that's going to be most effective. But I think this is one of the area that, you're going to be running into one way or another. And if nothing else, I'll probably get, hey, can you come diagnose this for us? We have the targets, but we can't figure out what's going on. That's where this knowledge would come in handy you got a unit that's flipped backwards or a thing that's bent and stuff like that. So knowing about these systems, I think, is still super important.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, a lot of it's trial and error on some of it too. Just got to
Sure.
go out there and fail a whole bunch.
Yes.
That's life. Hopefully you guys got a few more minutes. I did have one more question kind of pertaining to what we were talking about. You hear a lot of stuff and you see a lot of stuff. You guys probably know exactly what I'm talking about, where people are either really for or really against ASE, right? And so we're kind of talking about ASE, and we don't, it's a whole nother episode, obviously, to really go in depth, but I'm just curious to know if you are, I would assume both of you are, proponents of ASE, and what's the benefit of actually taking the time to do this test and others?
So you hear a lot of people say things like, I know someone who was an ASE master and they couldn't fix a sandwich. You hear that a lot. But I also know people who aren't ASE certified who really can't fix a sandwich. So they kind of wash each other out. I think generally speaking, people who are ASE certified come across more professional to me, in my opinion. And that's not putting anyone else down. I know there's a lot of people, if you run your own business, you don't need to be ASE certified. I think it's beneficial to be, but you don't need to be. But generally speaking, people who are ASE certified usually have a little bit more pride in themselves and their work. And that's the biggest bonus, in my opinion.
Yeah, so that's a multifaceted issue for sure. Same thing. I get the same thing. I've worked with technicians that were master ASE certified techs that really weren't stellar technicians when we think of the top 10% or whatever. And I've worked with the really awesome technicians that didn't have a single certification. And when you talk to the ones that are genuinely answering your question about why or why not, why do they not have ASEs? The vast majority of ones that don't have ASEs have told me they're not good test takers and they feel like they wouldn't pass them. And I can tell you, I've interviewed a lot of technicians, right? I'm both a technician, have been for a really long time, but I'm also a business owner that employs 4 people. So, and I've interviewed a lot of people during that. And I pop quiz everyone that interviews with me. They get an 8 to 10 question ASE test right in front of them. And they didn't know it was coming. And it really separates the individual. So I question them first, talk to them, and when they get that far, give them, and I kind of let them know, I'm like, hey, so these are really hard questions. Not very many people get all of these right, so please don't beat yourself up over it. These are intentionally difficult, and they kind of give me a baseline. I expect a certain amount of them to be incorrect and a certain amount to be correct, and if you get them all right, then you're going to far surpass my expectations, right? And kind of put them at ease. It still freaks them out. I can tell they're super freaked out because I just gave them 10 questions and they're losing their mind, right? And so I go, when you get done, we're gonna talk about them, and you can keep the sheet. I don't want it. I just want to hear how you came to each conclusion. And some of these, there might not be a right answer, so it's okay to be like, I'm not answering this, but we'll talk about it. So I kind of give them out. The truth is all of them are someone who's a technician that can do what we do. Should be able to answer all of these pretty easy. They're like circuit questions. And for me, it just separates, do they understand what field trims are? That's a kind of a basic diagnostic thing. And there's just 2 basic field trim questions on generic systems, and then 3 wiring ones and 1 oil pressure. So do they understand kind of how oil control valves work, or in a 3.6 engine, something that's similar, something very, very common we run into, right? Things. And I hate writing questions manufacturer specific, but this isn't an ASE test. They're just an ASE multiple choice style test. And it lets me know where they're at, right? And if they miss all the electrical ones and they don't have any clue about field trims, man, they work on a lot of cars. They change a lot of parts, but they're not really there. Right. Mm-hmm. And I get that a lot. Guys that tell me that, yeah, I'm a master tech at the dealer and blah, blah, all these things. And then I put these 10 questions in front of them and they can't answer a simple horn circuit. Right. So, and I mean, it's like a simple horn circuit question. So I get that a lot. And then I kind of run that in and find guys that the vast majority of guys that talk down about ASEs are because they failed them a couple of times. And and it's not because they're a bad technician or dumb technician. It might be that they psyched themselves out, right, and overanalyze questions. I did that in the beginning too. But when they get some animosity towards it, it's typically because they lack the actual fundamental understanding of the subject to really get it. Because that's all that an ASE test is that you understand the basics, if you're a master, ASE master, A1 through 8 plus 9 or whatever, that doesn't mean that you are a master technician of all of the things, right? Just you've got to, you have met the minimum qualifications to understand these systems, and that's it. So that's kind of when I hear about that argument between the two, I always want to set that straight. I'm like, real quick, just so we're clear, just so if someone's a master, it means they have a basic understanding of the fundamental systems. They understand those, and that's a great foundation to start. And then you got to prove it with real aptitude in the field, right? So I'm on both sides of the fence. ASE does not mean you're a master for real, but also it's not worthless. And as an owner, I actually disagree with PJ on that. I think if you're a business owner, you should push ASE super hard, at least for your technicians. I may have misunderstood what he was saying, but I think for your technicians, you need to have ASE. Because if we go to court and it's my ASE technician versus the other shop saying that we damaged this customer's car and that I should pay for it, and I'm certified and they're not, I win. I've been there and I've seen it. If I'm certified and you're not, I win the discussion. The judge is going to be like, it's great you've been working on cars for a really long time, but you have no certification proving anything. So that's it. It is the only defendable in court certification that we have, and that's important to me as a business owner.
I wasn't saying that shop owners shouldn't. I was saying that they should. They have their own choice. They can do whatever they want. But if I were running a business, I would want my guys to be ASE certified as well.
I think an owner doesn't, but the technicians need to.
Yeah.
Yeah. The verbiage of Master Tech, I've definitely questioned that myself because I aggressively got my, A1 through 8 and L1 as soon as I could out of tech school, as soon as the time, whatever it is, like you need so much experience. And I just got it. I probably still am, but I was so far from being a master technician. I had the patch and everything, and I felt it. I'm like, I don't know all this stuff, but I passed the test. But I think that's something to really make clear to people is that it is the base level of competence, but it shows professionalism and your commitment to professionalism and to this trade. And hey, that's what we need for something like court. Hopefully you're never in that situation, but just for the general public and dealing with customers, and why not? It's what we got. It's obviously a lot of work goes into making these tests, as you were describing, and I don't know if everybody knows that, but it is an enormous undertaking to make these tests what they are. So definitely take some time, and whether it's ADAS or not, I suggest go taking those tests if you don't have them.
Sean, when you're around a lot of students who probably feel that pressure of tests, do you see guys who are just bad test takers? Who can really just kick butt?
100%. Some people, and I wish I had a more technical answer as to why. I don't know. I'm not a psychologist or understand that side of it, but some people are so much better when you put a tool in their hands or a car in front of them as opposed to a piece of paper. And I think some of it is, like Keith mentioned, psyching yourself out. Like, this stuff, but the anxiety and the pressure just wipes everything. You're just a blank slate, just staring at this piece of paper, or you're moving too fast and not reading all of the question or all of the answers, or it could be some real basic rudimentary. They need some English class. That was one thing I experienced a lot because I'm at a community college. I have ESOLs, what the title is, English speakers of other languages, and they're trying to figure out English and then trying to answer these tests. But you give some of these guys some tools out in the shop and they're the best in the class. They just, the test side of it. So there's obviously a lot of variables there, but there are people who are really good at test taking, and they kind of figure it out, right? Because I make my questions the same way. Like, there's definitely a clear answer, and there's something that I'm working towards in the question. The way I asked the question is leading you towards something, if you understand that. And people can see that. Certain people can just see that in a question. Oh, he's nudging me in this direction. This is where this is the subject or the part of the lecture that this question was about. And then it's easier to find the answer, even if you didn't know it. but not everybody sees that, right? Or not everybody can see it in the moment. So it's a weird psychological thing. Who's good at tests and who isn't.
I separate them out 3 ways. There's people who are bad at taking tests. There's people who are not bad at taking tests. And then there are good test takers. And I don't mean that as in they always, they're not psyched out by it. That's someone who's not bad at taking tests. A good test taker is someone who analyzes the question based on its structure to determine the answer. Has nothing to do with the content, right? And that's someone who can recognize some of that pattern stuff. Someone who's, you could take someone who is a professional test taker and let them take an ASE test, and they probably wouldn't do very well. But you can take someone that's a professional test taker and let them take other tests that have not had millions of dollars poured into making it a good test to try to be structured well, and they can pass that test just based on the structure wasn't there. They didn't know about all these little nuances of writing test questions that give away the answer. So there's a lot to that. And another thing for me with the ASE test, it's voluntary. I feel like that gives it so much more of its weight. We're not required to take it.
Yeah, you dedicated some of your own personal time to make that happen.
Yeah, and drove across the city twice.
Yeah, once in the wrong direction.
So
hey, I took a test. Go ahead.
Are you both on the ASE app for A1 and through A8? Or it might even include A9. I don't have A9. But I'll tell you what, some of the questions on that are really well done. I had a question about relative compression.
Yeah, so there are a lot of test scope stuff on there that will not make it in a regular test that's on the app. We get away with a lot in the app.
A relative compression question about an exhaust valve not opening and how it would affect the compression waveform. Yep.
I'm waiting for new questions for my research.
They just came out. New questions. I got my notification like yesterday, the day before. New questions are available. Maybe it's based on when you sign up.
I think that's what it is.
Because mine, I don't get my next set of questions until the 14th.
Yeah, mine's the 22nd, so I just
mine's like the
them, but
3rd or 4th or something. So okay,
I really like that because if there is a downside to ASE, it is. I have taken the ASE breaks like 5 times now. And I'm just like, man, I do not feel like going and doing it. So having that app I really like that app.
Yeah. For anybody who's not familiar, I believe it's only for research, right? You can't do the initial test. Yeah. And so you download it on your phone and you get a series of questions, I think 1 a week, and same style ASE format. Oh, is it month? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
1 a month.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah, $50 a year, and you get 1 a month, and you have to pass 8 a fiscal year to research, and it research you for 1 year, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
But very convenient, and like PJ mentioned, all the questions have been great on that app that I've seen. They give you a little bit more time for the electrical questions because you kind of have to analyze the diagram and stuff. But it's not. I'm sure you could cheat if you were really trying to, but you kind of have to like get after it and answer that question. There's not a whole lot of time to look stuff up or anything like that.
Yeah, there's only three minutes for most electrical questions, maybe 4.
Yeah,
3 or 4 minutes.
3 minutes. Yeah, you really got to know.
Yep. But I'll include the links to everything we talked about tonight in the show notes for anybody listening wants to check the stuff out, get signed up. It'll all be there. Yeah, thanks for taking the time tonight, guys. I really appreciate it.
Heck yeah.
Thanks for having us.
All right, that's going to do it for today's episode. I want to give a big thank you to Keith and PJ for taking time out of their busy schedules to help me out on this. And I'd also like to thank everybody that's listening and the feedback that I've been getting and the suggestion like for this episode. So keep those coming. Really appreciate it. With that all out of the way, let's get out there and start fixing the world one car at a time.